Cut off on this video, but I'll probably start doing that more and more because I want to, the build is more important than me, so I'm going to start getting a little closer and closer with the camera when needed. So in the last video, the last thing I mentioned was bending wood. If you're watching this video, that's great, but again, this is the point where I'd like you to go forward in the videos to the point where I'm bending wood, because you need to get started on that now. Otherwise you're going to be stuck waiting for wood to dry. The next two steps are going to be to secure the board to the building table, and then to start adding glue strips, little pieces of wood for extra glue area on the ribs. You can do one before the other, but I've found that it's much easier to go ahead and start adding these glue strips now. And the reason is that it really flattens and straightens out the ribs. This is a little fish. We're not going to be building this kit. We're going to be building this one. This is, again, a Cal gun, 9'6" gun shape. I just brought this out for an example. This one has, this is a Generation 2 kit with the new Tucker tabs. And from the camera angle that you're at right now, it looks pretty good. But if we do this, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but these ribs are not all so perfect. Like this one's bowed this way. Some of them have a little bit of an S. We're really dry climate here in Southern California. If I send one of these kits to Florida or some place in the world where it's more moisture in the air, this wood can go a little crazy. So if you secure the table, the board to the table first, and then put the glue strips in, you'll end up fighting with it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to put these on first, and lost my train of thought. I remembered what I was going to say. If you've never done this before and you're going to do the glue strips first, as I suggested, it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and just dry fit the whole frame first. No glue or anything, but if you get the board to this position, you're going to wrap your head around what's going to happen next a little bit better. You don't need to do this. If you totally know what's going on, you totally get it, but that might not be a bad idea, just to know where you're at. Okay, so all we're doing now is we're going to add these little glue strips, which are, what I did is I took my bandsaw. With my bandsaw, I took this balsa stick. This is something that we sell at Wood Surfboard Supply. They're 36-inch long, 1.5 by 1.5. And I ripped them into little strips, quarter by quarter. And these are going to go on the ribs on both sides, all the way around. And on our Generation 2 kits, we have all the slots are here. Each rib is numbered. Some of our kits have rounded rib ends with a very small cut line. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a little mark there. And what that is for is some of our customers want a real challenge, and they will actually strip out the board with planks and make the planks smaller and wrap all the way around, even though it's a very tight bend. They'll achieve this with either very tiny bead and cove strips or with little trapezoid shaped rippings. It's obviously a ton of work. A lot of people like to do that, including myself. Sometimes I do enjoy the woodworking and the tools, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's fun. But other times, like this time, I just want to get through it. I just want the surfboard. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut on this mark that's predetermined later, and we're going to make just solid rails there. It's a much simpler way to do it. This whole video tutorial series, I'm going to use basically the most simple methods the whole way along. And later I might make other videos of some of the more complicated parts. So the reason why I wanted to explain that in detail right now is because we're going to add these balsa sticks, and some of my joinery is going to look a little rough at first. All I need to do is glue some strips on. They don't have to be bent to follow the curved. You can just cut straight pieces, and as long as they cover the edge, we're going to take a belt sander and sand this off later. And later we're going to trim this, the cut line like I was talking about. So for now I'm just running these kind of long because I'm going to cut those later. You also may have noticed that I've put the balsa squares right over the notches where the tucker tabs and the spar is going to go. It's a lot easier to put a whole piece in and keep it straight than it is small pieces that are cut exactly to length. Also, as you can see, my cuts aren't so perfect. Balsa is a very mushy soft wood, so it's kind of hard to cut with a saw or a knife. You can go for trying to make your cuts all perfect, but I was actually just snapping these off, which is fine. These are internal parts. Where I've run these over the slots, after the glue has set, I'm going to go ahead and clean everything up all the way around with a belt sander, and I'll take my little dovetail saw and just make a real perfect clean cut, and then everything's in alignment. So that's just what I wanted to explain what we're doing. So we're going to do this to all of the parts. Okay, let me refocus the camera and we'll continue. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just eyeballing. I switched pieces because when I rip these on the bandsaw, they're not all exactly the same size. So this is a smaller ribs. I found one that's just a little skinnier. And on both sides, I'm going to put this straight little piece right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut two. I'm just using I've got my fingernails are kind of long. I'm just kind of pinching in there and giving it a little snap. Again, you can get more precise with that and make it look better if you care to. It always is a good idea to make your work look as good as possible, even if no one's going to see it, but it sure is easy just to snap these sticks with my thumb. So that's what a lot of people are going to do, and me too. Okay, so I'm kind of roughly laying these out. And these side pieces, I make sure that I'm cut them a little long so they're going to go past that cut mark that I'm going to cut later. The bottom of this is relatively straight, so I'm going to cut one single piece to go right over the ribs. A lot of the ribs in our kits are literally dead straight. On this Calgon, the rails are turned up just a little bit on the bottom. So on some of the ribs that really curve up, I might have to put an extra piece there. Find another little piece that's another little one to match up. It's good if you, on each particular rib, if you're using two different rips like I just did, that you try to use a similar thickness. Actually, this one's not so good. Find one that's a little thinner. And the reason why, to get them a similar thickness, is because it's going to make it easier to clamp later. Okay, so now I'm all ready to start gluing. I cut all those ahead of time because I'm going to try to lay glue on this very quickly and then put something on top of it and clamp it. So I want all these pre-cut because, believe it or not, this glue, the Type On 3 that I like to use for this, it goes off pretty quick. So you don't have a lot of time. So I'm ready to go. So let's go ahead and I'm putting these side by side. My glue bottle's got a little something stuck on there. There we go. So I'm putting a little bead on one, and then I'm just gonna put that together to transfer it to the other side. Just make sure it gets glue everywhere. Rather, it's such a small part, I can't really use my fingers, so I put a little bit on and then push them together. That kind of spreads everything nicely. So I'm just gonna set that on. No clamp or anything for now. And just whichever way works for you to get them on. Again, I'm trying to, I don't want to take too long here. This stuff starts going off. Okay, so those are all good. So you know, just the glue alone just makes it stick a little bit. Let me go ahead and turn that over. These are all now pre-glued. Oh, when I laid face down, so I lost some of the glue. Let's put a little more on there. Okay, now all I'm going to do is, I have these sticks, they're just left over from something I made. They're nice and straight and flat. And I'm just going to carefully pick this up, make sure everything's just the way I wanted it. Oops. And then make a little sandwich. I'm very careful. I'm going to give it a pinch. I'm very careful not to allow it to slide or move at all. These little one-handed quick clamps are good for this. It's almost like having another hand. Okay, so let's see if the camera can pick it up. You can see that's making the rib perfectly straight, sandwiching my parts in there. See if you can see the other side. Got a little glue squeeze out happening everywhere. And I'll just put that aside. And get to work on the next piece. And I can just move right along here because in the amount of time it's going to take me to make all these parts up, to do the same thing over again, depending on your climate, that setup over there is likely going to be able to come apart. So you don't need a zillion clamps. I do have just enough clamps to probably set up something similar. So if I do that one more time and I go to the third one, by that time the first one really, it's been there long enough. This stuff really only needs about 20 minutes to tack up to where you can unclamp it. Again, depending on your climate. If you give it a half an hour, 45 minutes, if you really want to be safe, or an hour, for sure it's going to be totally gone off. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going, and this rib is starting to turn up just a little bit, So I think what I'm going to do on this one is right where the tucker tabs are going to be, I'm going to put a rough joint. I do kind of want to hit this on the mark, so I'll go ahead and use my little razor knife. And the pieces that I cut off, those will be perfect for where it turns up. So again, just do whatever you got to do, follow the shape, and it's going to, look a little rough at first. By the time we trim up the ends and belt sand these parts until you hit the plywood, they're all going to be looking good. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm just trimming everything up now that the glue has dried, trimming it up on my belt sander. And what you want to do is you want to be very, very careful that you just sand the glue strips down till you just touch the plywood. You don't want to sand into this plywood and distort it at all, because what you're doing is you are changing the shape of the surfboard. And if you've sanded into the rib on just one, that will be a little bit of a dip, which, all these things can be fixed later, but better to not have things to fix. Now, one thing that's kind of nice about the Generation 2 kits that are laser cut is all of the edges are black because they're burnt from the laser. So that's sort of helpful in this step because I can sand the balsa down just until the black goes away. That means I just touched it. So right there, it's time to stop. So I'm just going to do that to every single rib. I'm going to sand the outside, and after that, I'll open these back up again with my dovetail saw. And I'm thinking I'm going to cut the ends off with either my little dovetail saw, or maybe I'll cross cut it on my bandsaw. I'm not sure yet, but we'll do that next. Until then, I'll just keep going. So as you can see, I've got the glue strips all nicely sanded just until the black from the laser cutting goes away on the ribs. Now I am going to go ahead and cut on the cut marks. As you can see, I've sanded off the glue strips, the balsa glue strips, just until the black from the laser cutting goes away on the ribs, and I didn't sand any more. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut on the supplied cut mark with the bandsaw. Next, I'm going to go ahead, take my little dovetail saw, or maybe I'll do the bandsaw. I might do the bandsaw again. Either way, I'm going to go ahead and open up these slots for the spar and the tucker tabs. Okay, as you can see, I've used my bandsaw. Pretty much any opportunity to use this thing I do. I just love it. You can do so much with these things. So as you can see, I've just cleaned, the rib ends are cut off. I've cleaned up the tucker tab slots. and the spar slots. Next, it's time to put this frame together on the building table. Okay, back to the build table. So I have all my ribs with the glue strips all set up. Now it's time to go ahead and get it organized on the table. Let's clear this off so we can put this thing together. Okay, I've got my workbench organized a little bit more. What we're going to do is when you put the tabs in, you want to make sure that the slots seat 100%. The bottom of this slot hits the bottom of the slot on the rib. Okay, so I've got everything dry fit, and this is a point where I always get excited. Even though I've built a lot of these kits, I can see the shape. It's going to be a shape that I'm going to have a lot of fun riding, so I really love this part. It never gets old. So I haven't attached this to the table at all. Basically, I've just dry fit everything once again. My next step is going to be fitting to the table, and we're going to go to the next video and really go into what it takes to put this all together nice and level, flat, straight. The Tucker tabs are going to make that very easy, but there's still a few tricks, and we'll show you that in the next video.